All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be doing the next video part for the Eyes of the Beast project. We're going to be going through and showing you guys how to go ahead and do texture. So, most of you have furry critters. Most of you. It is not all of you. Hair is interesting because y'all want to draw these incredibly long strands. It's like you want to draw every single follicle of hair. But for it to be believable, you don't ever want to do that. You don't need to draw every single hair. You actually want to focus more on clumps. If you look at this lemur, for example, and I'm going to do a couple of samples here, but if you look at this lemur, for example, we have a lot of different hair types. We have longer hair over here at his little ears. We have shorter hair over here on his muzzle. Okay? If you look, it clumps up. So we have a grouping of hair that almost forms like this perfect little diamond shape right here in his ear. He's got almost this kind of C shape right here where all the clumps are. Can you see the individual hairs right here? Or do you actually see just the dark splotches inside of it? Well, you really just see the dark splotches in besides with maybe a little bit more texture on the outside. So how we address this, and then we look over here and we can actually see ridges in his hair here. If y'all have dogs with collars, 9 times out of 10, if they've got longer hair, they're going to have these little ridges on the side right here by their jawline. These aren't just random lines. They have direction, they have length, and they have shape and value. So we have to represent that. And that's going to be true for every animal. So I'm going to do a couple of different texture samples. We're going to start here with Mr. Julian, King Julian up here. No, I'm not going to sing the song, don't ask. But we're going to start over here with this ear shape. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw a slight circle, and this is just for practice. This is not how the actual animal looks. This is just so I can draw this stuff in here. But we have kind of a, it looks like an egg, whatever. We'll roll with it. I don't care enough. We have this shape here. If we look at the edges of fur, it has lines. Now, most of you guys are guilty of doing this, which actually by itself doesn't look too bad. I have a slightly modified version. So we have longer hair up here at the top. I'm going to do shorter hair over here on the side. But if you look, the shapes that I'm drawing are more like little dashes with letters kind of mixed in. There's some N's, some W's, some M's. I'm only saying letters because it looks that way. Don't actually draw letters. Don't go, it doesn't look M enough. I have to think. Nobody cares. It's just about the dashes. Okay? So I got like little short ones over here. I'm going to put some more long hairs over here on this one. Okay? And that's just to give me some variety in the texture. Now, what do we notice about this? Well, we notice that my lines move in different directions. I've got lines that move out, I've got lines that move down, and that's going to emulate what's going on over here with the lemur. So he's got these lines right here around his muzzle that actually curve. Some of them come out this way. These right here come this direction. Okay? These ones curve back and down around. That line direction is important. So we're looking at the length, we're looking at the direction. So right here, if I do a whole series that mimics this, where they go in different directions, notice I'm using short little marks. I'm not using long ones. But can you guys see how that line changes? I'm going to switch its direction right here just to be ornery. It's starting to look like a hedgehog with a mohawk. If I change the direction of those lines, y'all see how it makes it look like those lines are, like the fur is actually going in different directions? And if I add, just like in here where you have these splotchy areas that are just a little bit darker, if I add these splotchy areas that are just a little bit darker, it reads like fur. It's a little bit out of focus. It's a little bit out of focus. I'm not entirely sure if I can fix that. I feel like that's just the camera and I'm stuck. Yeah, that's just the camera and I'm stuck. Anyways, you get the idea in the texture of fur here. I could do slightly longer fur with slightly longer lines. Notice that I'm still following the initial curve. Okay? And we'll just have it change direction too. My line direction is incredibly important. So if you see fur moving in one direction on critter, you should probably draw it that same direction on your drawing. Notice that I have gaps. I'm not trying to fill the whole thing in. Notice that my shapes start to clump a little bit. You'll see this little shape right here that's coming out. okay? And then longer fur is the same sort of mechanic, where you'll have areas where it's really nice and long and that line kind of reflects that stuff. He's getting a cowlick right here for whatever reason. Sometimes with fur, it's darker on one end than it is on the other. So you can actually come back, especially for the longer fur, you'll notice that, where it'll be darker at the root. Generally, you'll go pay a hairdresser to fix that, but darker at the root and lighter at the ends. And sometimes it'll have that extra dark at the end. But does this look like fur? It's starting to. Does it look like it belongs to an animal? I hope not, because if there's an animal shaped this type of shape, he probably belongs in Star Trek. I'm not making that joke. I did not make that joke. That's a bad joke. I'm old. Okay? So that's fur in a nutshell. Does it take practice? Yes. If you don't get it right, draw the line again. For whatever reason, I just feel like that needs to be a comb-over shape. Comb-over! Okay. But that's just a general idea for fur. So we get the representation for the lemur. Having these little dark splotches that are in here help create the illusions of clumps and help us give that depth that the fur needs. Line direction, line length. Those are the biggest components. So if the lines are really short, if the hairs are short, use shorter lines. If the lines are longer, use longer lines. Add in dark spaces and values in order to create that depth. Okay? That's fur. Feathers are very similar. But feathers are shape-based. So if we look over here at this guy, he's got tiny little feathers over here around his face. He's got softer looking feathers up here, and then he's got these big floofy line things showing up because the feather is facing us. Feathers start with the shape. So similarly to what we did with Mr. Julian over here, we're going to take, I'm not going to call him that. If I call him that, that's going to be bad. We're going to take this owl. I am a good person some days. And we're going to focus on shapes. So right here, I have these really long, narrow shapes. They kind of signify where feathers are. I can see up here, he's kind of got these comey looking shapes. So they actually are kind of like scales. And we can get like the general shape idea going on up here. Then we have these really long feathers. These are all about shapes. Again. And I'm just drawing in the rough shape. Does this look like feathers yet? No. Is that okay? Yes, because this is the start. Okay? So what we'll do up here with these ones is a feather is pretty easily constructed. Feather starts off, you've got the main central shaft area. Okay? Then you'll have the feather shape. Now there's lots of different feather shapes. Most of them are rounded at the end. These ones, for example, are really rough. You can't see it in the photo, but if you have this critter, you can actually see all of these individual lines and tendrils. So they have all of these individual little lines. They're kind of got a zipper-esque sort of quality. When you see birds grooming, 9 times out of 10 what they're doing is they're closing these little zippers back up because it makes them fly more efficiently. Okay? So if you look at cartoon feathers, you'll end up with something like this. And then it's usually got some feathers there on the end. Okay? But these line directions, you've got the central shaft, and this is all feathers, and then they have the little combs that come out. Downy feathers are going to be softer, so they'll look really round. They'll still have that central shaft, but they're like super freaking fluffy. So they go generally in an outward direction, but they're still really just kind of fluffed, fuzzed out. Baby bird feathers look like this. So they look like they're furry, but in reality it's just feathers that aren't zipped at all. Wing pinions are a little bit more like this. They're more stringent. Body feathers are more rounded. They kind of look like scales usually. Please note that there are exceptions to all of these. This is just general ideas for how this works. Okay, so you'll have the shaft right here. You'll have the body feather. It'll usually have some fluff. But these feathers will usually have a little bit more of a defined outer edge. They still kind of constrain themselves a little bit more smoothly. Unlike the downy feathers, kind of like a combination of the two. And you'll still end up with these kind of dimensional zippers going along the edge here. They round out. So using slightly curved lines actually works really well. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that was off the camera. Okay? Again, usually, not always, so look at your actual critter to figure out exactly what's breaking down. As far as actually drawing this stuff, again, it's all about the shape. So these head feathers, he's got a lot of markings. They're actually dark at their core. They're a little bit fluffy, so they have these kind of softer edges going on. So I can sit here with my edges, not using a toothbrush or anything, but I can sit here with my edges and just kind of pull out that texture. That was a bad joke, just roll with it. Okay. Draw like the illusion for where that central shaft is at. You don't need the whole thing. I've got all this value. His feather is actually really dark at the center core, and then he's got like a lighter tip. So I can sit here, and I'm going to come from the middle, and I'm going to draw lines in the direction. Notice how they overlap, though. I'm not sitting here trying to go too much, and some of them are going to go all the way to the edge. And then I'll do the same thing here with this one. I really wish this camera was clearer. My lines are going out from that central shaft. The shaft is basically disappearing, which it does. If you look over here, you don't actually really see it because the feathers are dark. But I'm just really quickly kind of laying that in. Remember, what I did first was I drew the shape of the feather. Okay? And it's because he's got like this really crisp sort of pattern on his feathers that I can get away with what I'm getting away with. But you can see how that starts to look like his body feathers. I'm not putting in a whole ton of effort. This isn't taking me a whole ton of time to do it. It's just a couple of really quick marks to get that texture in here. These longer feathers that he has down here on his face, you can really easily, clearly see where that shaft is. It is a very clear line. So I've got my general shape of the feather. I'm going to draw the line down the middle of it. Draw that line down the middle of it. And then because I can see these marks, I'm just going to very lightly draw them. Now they're light. They're light, so I'm actually using, the camera is killing me here on this one, guys. I'm so sorry. But I'm going to have those lines come in, and then I'm going to actually draw the spaces in between them for the shadowing, because these are lighter than the shadows between. So believe it or not, I'm actually going to be drawing more of the negative space, the space in between those marks, than I spend on the feathers themselves. I get the general shape, and then I just kind of work in where the darks are in between them. Okay? And that'll get you those feathers. These ones, yeah, these ones are fun. Again, you're focusing on the spaces between. So I drew the shapes. I'm going to color in the negative spaces in between them. And then I'm going to make sure that I have some marks that kind of cut in the direction of those feathers. So they're smoother on top than they are on the bottom, so I can just leave that kind of smooth and then have the roughness on the bottom of it. And then there's like a little bit of closure off at the end where they lighten up. And if you build all this stuff together, it eventually starts looking feathered. But you can see how it slowly starts to work. I apologize that this camera is just not doing a good job. Pokey Bear over here, whoever has this guy, you got like all these little spikes. He's got a freaking McFreak ton. As far as how to pull that off, and if you got the bearded vulture, it's actually the same sort of concept. Get the big shape first. You do not have to sit here and try to draw every single one of these perfect. I am not looking for photorealism. I'm not looking for photorealism. So you want the general spikes. Notice their shape. They are narrow at one end, they're fatter at the other. Now you know why Sonic is actually spiky, because this is what he's, yeah. Okay? And then I just kind of build them up. I can have them come closer to each other. I can have them overlay. I'm just drawing big spikes. Now, you don't want to make them too fat. If you make them too fat, they don't look realistic anymore. But you kind of want to get these shapes in there and build them up slowly. I am not rushing this. So we have this, and we're just going to kind of look at the details. They are definitely darker at the bottoms. So if I come in here onto this spike, and I make it dark on the bottom, and kind of round it, and I do that for all of these where they're dark on the bottom, and use these curved. Notice my lines are curved, guys. use these curved lines coming out. I can do that with all of these. Start at the bottom and let them kind of work their way out. Using those curved lines. And I can slowly build up. I'm going to put one in here now. I can slowly build up that texture until it turns into what I need it to. And it's not taking me a whole lot of time to pull this off, right? I mean, I'm not exactly spending hours coloring each one of these things to make them perfect. I'm getting a rough texture in the right area. Now, he's soft and fluffy. You can kind of see it up in here. He's soft and fluffy in between, so I can actually add just like a couple little hairs going on in here to fill out that space after I have my spikes. The word was gone, sorry. After I have my spikes in here. But I can build this up, excuse me, to get what I need. I can add slightly darker areas. I can add some fluff in between. And it'll build up into a hedgehog texture. But you have to actually take the time to do it. Okay? Building it up slowly is how we get there. Elephant texture. This guy looks like worn out leather. Let's be real. If you have him, you are probably going to want to start with the basic, circle. You're going to probably want to start with the basic values. So I can see, I'm going to focus right in here. Notice how I changed my pen, how I'm holding my pencil. I'm going to start right over here with a slightly darker shadow. I'm going to have that drop down. He's got this patch for his eyeball. His eye is up here. I'm just going to kind of layer this in really quick. Slightly darker, really dark around his eye. He's got an eyelid. Go outside of the circle because I'm an artist and lines don't constrain me. Wah ha 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 ha. Just roll with that. I don't know what that was. Okay? And you get the general value for things. So slightly darker areas, slightly lighter. And then you're going to come in here and you're going to draw a bunch of lines. It sounds a little counterintuitive, but you're going to draw these wrinkles. We're going to go, okay, I have big wrinkles. Start with the big ones. I have these big wrinkles that drape through here. So I'm going to add those in first. Big wrinkle. Big wrinkle. Big wrinkle. Huge freaking wrinkles. Dude has got some bags. He needs a cucumber. Stat. Okay? Big wrinkles. Big fold. This is a really big structure that comes over here over his eyeball. Okay? Big fold. Slightly less big fold. Okay? But we get those structures. And then we're just going to kind of soften those out a little bit. Instead of leaving them all fat, underneath of them, because if you look, you can see on the bottom of these structures is where the shadow is. So on the bottom of these structures, I'm going to kind of enhance that shadow a little bit. And that's true for pretty much all of his bags. It's true for his eyelid. It's on that one side of them. It's true a little bit here. It's a little less on these big jowly looking things. We just kind of soften that line so it's not a hard line. Okay? Then we do the same thing with these wrinkles. If we look, it's all about the direction. So he's got these wrinkles that just kind of fold over his folds. And they go in different directions. They're not perfectly curved. Some of them go in multiple directions. Okay, he's got like multiple wrinkles up here in his little eye flappies. He's got these ones that go across it. And this one's going to take a little bit more time. If you were one of the people that grabbed an elephant, I'm actually trying to think if anyone grabbed an elephant this year. If you're one of the kiddos that grabbed an elephant, you're going to have to build this one up. But you build it up slowly, and then you start adding darks above your wrinkles. Slight darks, slight darks, slight darks. This builds up over time. So you have to kind of work it a little bit. Add all your wrinkles in the right location. Excuse me. Or at least the roughly right location. Add all of them in there. And then if you happen to have a nice little pencil, you can come in, and if you've got these mid-tone grays, you can pull back out where the whites are. Just a little bit. You can't see this at all on this freaking camera. Oi. Anyways, color in his eye because I just feel like I need to. I really want to spend more time working on that, but I'll probably lose my mind if I do. I'm going to put this out. Chameleon. I have to tell you guys, this one's really easy. Y'all overthink the snot out of it. Every one of his scale shapes is rounded. Every one of them. Okay? So you have your basic shape here. You want small scales, draw small circles. If you want those scales to be darker in some areas, use a darker line, or go over it again, shade it in, so I could draw this nice little stripe on him. You don't have to draw all the circle. You don't have to do the whole thing. Sometimes just having like a little bitty part of the circle, y'all can't see this at all. Oh my gosh. My camera is just not up to anything. And I still can't figure out which one to zoom in. We'll draw it slightly bigger and see if it shows up a little bit more. If I draw a bunch of circles and I draw them kind of dark, I'll get these nice dark lines. And just kind of build it up slowly. Try not to overlap them. Scales don't do this. Okay? If they don't touch a little bit, it's fine. Okay, but I can have different lightnesses and different darknesses. I can have different values. If I need bigger scales, like what's going on over here on his head, I can have that shape for it, and I can say that scales are actually bigger. Now, they're not actually circles. If you look close, they're kind of like, they have like this pentagon sort of shape going on, but I could draw circles as a placeholder. He's got some small scales kind of mixed into the bigger scales, so I can get like this stuff going on. This is true for most reptiles where they'll have like this big generalized shape. And then I can come back in and I can go, give it a little bit more of a geometric feel, kind of refine that back out a little bit. And the circles are just a placeholder for what the shape's going to turn into. Filling it in a little bit in between those shapes will give it a little bit more character. And then you can look at the shape on each individual scale and go, it's got a little bit of shadow, a lot of shadow. And you just build that up. It kind of looks a little bit like a rock, but by the time you're actually done on the critter, it will start to read correctly. Gator, crocodile, I do not know which. We're going to go with crocodilian again because I'm lazy. Guys, he's all geometric. You can use the circles to kind of fill him out, but you can very clearly see 3 distinct lines down here on his neck. It's that exact same process where you draw a generalized circle shape, and then you just kind of break it down into the more geometric. Okay, so you'd have your stripe. I would start drawing the stripes where they go. I would add in circles going along them to give me a general idea for what the shape actually is. And then I would go in there, zoom it in. Then I would go in there and refine that shape so it's a little bit more geometrically based. I don't build up these automatically. I don't assume that I'm going to start coloring the one and it's going to look exactly like a scale before I jump to the next piece. I build it up slowly so that I end up with the texture that I want. Think about that purse I want to buy. Not really. No. Not a big fan of gator skin, actually. Okay? But you build it up slowly. I knocked down half of my desk. In order to get the actual shape that you need. It's not always going to be perfect. And you may have these little scales in between. He's actually got a couple like right over in here to kind of fill that space back up. Okay? It just takes time to do it. That is all I'm going to cover for today. If you have specific questions after following the generalized idea, then we'll have to go from there. But other than that, y'all got stuff to work on. Get going.